On the 4th of January 2019, footage from the other bar on South Limestone Street in Lexington, Kentucky, shows a woman walking out the front door at 2:30 a.m. She is arm in arm with a man, stumbling slightly. A second man walks ahead of them. A third follows close behind. The cameras track them to the parking lot, where they split into two vehicles and drive south. At 3:08 a.m., the woman's mother receives a FaceTime call. On the screen, her daughter is squeezed into the back seat of a moving car. "Mom, I'm fine," the daughter says. "Everything's fine. I promise I will be home later this morning." She was there to meet strangers for one drink, unaware it would be the last time anyone would see her alive. Savannah Spurlock was 22 years old on the 3rd of January 2019. 5 feet tall, 140 pounds, brown hair, a tattoo on her torso reading, "I can do all things through Christ, which strengthens me." She lived with her mother Ellen in Richmond, Kentucky. 5 weeks earlier, she had given birth to twins Zuri and Zane, joining her sons Noah, age 4, and Jace, age 2. 4 boys under 5. She was exhausted, recovering, barely leaving the house. Her best friend Savannah Spurlock later told investigators that Savannah was paranoid about her phone dying and rarely went anywhere. Ellen encouraged her daughter that Thursday night, "Go out, you need a break." Savannah borrowed her mother's car and drove 45 minutes to Lexington with a friend. They arrived at the other bar around 10 p.m. The bar was packed, music pounding, bodies pressed together under dim lights. One friend left early work in the morning. Savannah got into an argument with the remaining friend, who also left. Suddenly she was alone, drunk, alone in a crowded bar in a city she didn't live in. Surveillance cameras captured what happened next. At 2:30 a.m., Savannah walked out arm in arm with a man. A second man walked slightly ahead. The third man, David Sparks, 23, a construction worker, followed behind. None of them had ever met Savannah before. They had gone out drinking that night and ended up at the other bar. The footage showed Savannah laughing, stumbling, holding onto the man's arm for balance. She appeared to be leaving willingly. 2 cars waited in the parking lot. Savannah got into the back seat of one vehicle with 2 of the men. Sparks got into his own car and followed. They pulled out, heading south on the highway, and the cameras lost sight of them. Ellen Spurlock woke at 3 a.m. and realized her daughter wasn't home. She called. Savannah initially hung up, then FaceTimed back. Ellen could see her daughter in a moving vehicle, a man she didn't recognize driving, people hollering in the back seat. Savannah was intoxicated but did not appear distressed. "I'm fine. Everything's fine. I promise I will be home later this morning. I promise, Mom." It was the last time Ellen saw her daughter alive. The car wasn't heading back to Richmond. It was heading 40 miles south to 118 Price Court in Garrard County, David Sparks' rental house near Lancaster. Neighbors were spread far apart. You couldn't see inside someone's windows even if you wanted to. Sparks lived there alone. In the early morning hours of January 4, all 4 arrived at the house. Everyone drank. Savannah was intoxicated when they arrived, and the alcohol kept flowing. What happened inside was later described in video-recorded police interviews with the 2 other men, who were eventually cleared of wrongdoing. Both told investigators that Savannah was drifting in and out of consciousness, slumped on furniture, her head lolling to the side. David Sparks was touching her inappropriately. One man later told police that as they were leaving, he turned to his friend and asked, "Should we have left her there?" They decided Sparks wouldn't hurt her. As soon as the 2 men walked out the door, Savannah Spurlock was alone with David Sparks. In the hours that followed, he killed her. The exact method of death was never determined. 6 months of burial destroyed the forensic evidence. Asphyxiation, strangulation, blunt force trauma, the decomposition eliminated those answers. But investigators later found blood, Savannah's blood, confirmed by DNA testing on a closet door inside Sparks' bedroom, blood spatter on the walls. Someone had tried to wipe it down, but luminol revealed the truth. The bedroom rug was missing. Sparks had recently and thoroughly cleaned the house. But you can't erase DNA. You can't hide blood spatter. Cell phone records revealed Sparks' movements after Savannah died. On the evening of January 4, less than 24 hours after the murder, he drove to his parents' farm on Fall Lick Road. He stayed for 2 hours, left, then returned in the early morning hours of January 5 for another 2 hours. He was burying a body, Savannah's body, wrapped in black trash bags, her feet bound with shipping tape, folded into an unnatural position inside the missing bedroom rug. He buried her 19 inches deep in the strawberry patch behind his parents' house. On January 4, while Savannah's body was still inside his house, Sparks sent a text message to his sister. "Hey, where did you get that rug? I'm going to get another one." Walmart surveillance footage captured him purchasing a replacement rug, the exact same type, the exact same color. He rolled it out in his bedroom where the old one used to be. Then he went about his life. Savannah's phone went dead around 8:30 a.m. on January 4. It never turned on again. Ellen reported her daughter missing to Richmond police that evening. Police moved quickly. They obtained surveillance footage from the other bar and identified the 3 men by January 9. All 3 were questioned. They gave statements, but no one was arrested. There wasn't enough evidence yet. The search began. Richmond Police, Kentucky State Police, the FBI, Lancaster PD, Garrett County Police, Texas EquiSearch traveled from out of state. Cajun Coast Search and Rescue came from Louisiana. K-9 units arrived from multiple states. Former Marines who were friends with Savannah's father Cecil joined the effort. Savannah's aunt Lisa Toma ran a Facebook page from Ohio called Missing Savannah Spurlock. It grew to 40,000 followers. The hashtag Savannah Strong spread across social media. Lamar Advertising donated 2 billboards along Route 27 in Jessamine County. Savannah's face stared down at passing drivers. A candlelight vigil at Eastside Community Church in Richmond drew hundreds. Searchers combed the Kentucky River, dragging the water with specialized equipment. They checked every bridge in Garrett County, cornfields, farmland, burn piles, a cave system after a tip in April. Police knew where to focus. They had evidence Savannah went to Sparks' house, phone records, witness statements, but they had no evidence she ever left. In February 2019, police obtained a warrant to search the Sparks family farm on Fall Lick Road. They brought cadaver dogs, ground-penetrating radar, forensic specialists. Sergeant Kelly Fraze was there that day. Years later, after the case closed, she revealed something that still haunts her. She had stood directly on top of the strawberry patch where Savannah's body was buried. She stood right there, inches above the grave, but they found nothing. The burial was too shallow for the equipment to detect. The dogs didn't alert. The grave was so recent, the earth hadn't settled enough to create a visible depression. Savannah was 19 inches below Sergeant Fraze's feet, and she walked away without knowing. In April, police searched Sparks' house on Price Court a second time. They found the blood evidence, Savannah's DNA on the closet door, blood spatter on the walls. They knew she'd died in that house. But where was her body? 6 months passed. Noah, the oldest at 4 years old, kept asking Ellen, "Where's Mama?" The twins, Zuri and Zane, were too young to understand. They'd been born just 5 weeks before their mother disappeared. They would never remember her face. David Sparks went about his life, working, eating, sleeping. On the 10th of July 2019, Sparks' father Alan was doing yard work. He decided to do some digging in the strawberry patch routine maintenance. Turning over the soil, his shovel hit something. The smell that came out of the ground was overwhelming, putrid, unmistakable. Alan Sparks stopped digging, backed away from the hole, and called his attorney. The attorney called police at 5 p.m. Within hours, investigators in hazmat suits descended on the farm with a search warrant. They started excavating at 10:30 p.m. under portable floodlights. The dig went slowly, carefully. Just before midnight on July 10, they found her. Savannah Spurlock's remains, 19 inches deep. Her body was naked, folded into an unnatural position. Her feet were bound with shipping tape, the kind you use to seal boxes. She'd been wrapped in multiple black trash bags. Behind her back, wrapped around her like a shroud, was the missing bedroom rug from Sparks' house, the exact one he'd texted his sister about. The grave was so shallow that rain could have exposed it, animals could have disturbed it. But for 6 months, it had stayed hidden. Savannah had been less than 100 yards from the house where Sparks' parents lived, where Sparks himself had visited dozens of times since January. While the excavation was happening while men in hazmat suits were pulling Savannah's body out of that grave, David Sparks showed up at Richmond Police Department. He hadn't been called in. No one had contacted him. He just appeared. He told officers he'd locked his keys in his vehicle and needed help. Then he mentioned, almost casually, that he'd probably need a public defender soon. The body was being recovered at the exact same time Sparks was walking into a police station unprompted. Sergeant Fraze later said she believed Sparks knew his father had found the body, that somehow he'd gotten word and he'd decided to make a move before the arrest came. On July 11, Savannah Spurlock's remains were formally identified through autopsy at the State Medical Examiner's office in Frankfort. Ellen finally had an answer to where her daughter was, but she would never get an answer to the question that tormented her most. On the 22nd of January 2019, weeks before the body was found, police had executed a search warrant at 118 Price Court. They photographed the house, collected DNA samples, searched for evidence. On David Sparks' bedside table, they found a handwritten letter. The detective who discovered it described it as one of the most disturbing pieces of evidence she'd ever encountered. The letter was written in Sparks' handwriting, It read like a confession from someone who knew exactly what they were. I simply don't care at all. I feel no true love for anything, now that I know what I really am. It continued. I see a greater need to hide my true self, but I just want to be free. I stay in a constant state of aggression. Nothing seems to help anymore. I have an abyss for a soul that sucks every attempt to make myself whole. Then the line that made investigators' blood run cold. How do you look your mother in the eyes and tell her you are a born psychopath? That she gave birth to a monster. Someone who wouldn't care a bit to squeeze the last breath out of another human or plunge a knife into their chest and smile about it. Sparks later told investigators he'd written the letter a year or two earlier during a period of depression. Sergeant Fraze didn't believe him. She believed he'd written it after Savannah died, because it read like a confession, like someone trying to explain what they'd just done. Fraze described meeting Sparks for the first time. She called him stone cold. She said there was something about him that made the hair on the back of her neck stand up. There was just something in his eyes. After Sparks was arrested and placed in Lincoln County Detention Center, a jail guard made another disturbing discovery drawings sketched on paper in his cell. They depicted women. One was naked, another was bound. When investigators searched Sparks' phone, they found his Google search history. In the weeks and months after Savannah disappeared, while volunteers were searching fields and rivers and organizing candlelight vigils, David Sparks was sitting at home Googling "Richmond missing mom" over and over again. He was watching the news coverage, reading the Facebook posts, tracking the searches. He knew exactly where Savannah was because he'd put her there. David Sparks was arrested on the 11th of July 2019, the day the body was identified. He was initially charged with tampering with physical evidence and abuse of a corpse. On the 28th of August 2019, a Garrard County grand jury added murder to the indictment. Sparks pleaded not guilty at his September arraignment. The case crawled through the legal system. Continuances, delays, motions, COVID hit, grinding everything to a halt. For more than a year, Savannah's family waited. The death penalty was off the table. Under Kentucky law, the prosecution needed to prove specific aggravating circumstances to pursue capital punishment. Because decomposition had destroyed forensic evidence about exactly how Savannah died, they couldn't meet that burden. No one could prove she'd been tortured or that she'd suffered prolonged violence. The medical examiner simply didn't have enough left to work with. Commonwealth's attorney Andy Sims prepared for a trial seeking life in prison, but David Sparks had other plans. On the 1st of December 2020, Sparks appeared in Garrard County Circuit Court before Judge Hunter Doherty and changed his plea. Guilty. Guilty to murder. Guilty to abuse of a corpse. Guilty to tampering with physical evidence. The plea agreement was read aloud in court. During the early morning hours of the 4th of January 2019, at 118 Price Court in Garrard County, Kentucky, the defendant, acting alone, intentionally caused the death of Savannah Spurlock. After so doing, he bound her legs and wrapped her body in plastic bags. He later transported her body to Fall Lick Road and buried her in the yard behind that residence. Intentionally caused her death. Those were the words that mattered, because that's what made it murder. Sims told reporters, "I needed him to admit to intentionally causing her death, because that's what he did, and that's exactly what he admitted to doing." The sentence was 50 years for murder, 5 years for abuse of a corpse, 1 year for tampering with evidence, all running concurrently. Total of 50 years in prison. By pleading guilty, Sparks also gave up his right to appeal. Formal sentencing was held on the 17th of December 2020, conducted over Zoom because of COVID restrictions. Savannah's family watched from the Commonwealth's attorney's office. David Sparks said nothing. He just nodded as the judge read the sentence. Under Kentucky law, David Sparks becomes eligible for parole after serving 20 years. That means around 2039 or 2040, David Sparks could walk free. He'd be in his early 40s. Still young, still capable of living a full life. Savannah will still be in that grave. Savannah's children are growing up without their mother. Noah is now old enough to understand what happened. Jace is starting to ask questions. The twins, Zuri and Zane, are being raised on stories about the woman they'll never remember. Sabrina Speratos, their godmother, has taken on a sacred responsibility. I spend a lot of time with them in hopes of giving them that love that's missing in their lives. I will never replace their mother, but it's something Savannah would want me to do. The boys are being raised by their fathers and extended family. Ellen sees them often. She keeps Savannah's memory alive through photographs, blankets, songs, Christmas ornaments, occasional visits to the gravesite. 1 year after Savannah's remains were found, a family member described the boys as full of their mama's energy, with the twinkle in their eyes. Ellen asked the question the plea deal would never answer. I want to know why. Why did he do this to her? You didn't even know her. The plea deal meant there would never be a trial, no testimony, no detailed explanation, no cross-examination of David Sparks on the witness stand. Just a guilty plea and 50 years. Shaq Smith, the father of 3 of Savannah's children, said the plea brought relief, but not justice. 50 years or less for a life doesn't seem like a fair trade. Lisa Toma, Savannah's aunt who ran the Facebook page and coordinated much of the search effort, addressed Sparks directly after sentencing. He may think he's out in 20 years. No, sir. Our fight has just begun, because Mr. Sparks, her sons will be grown men, fighting for a mother he stole from them. She added something that chilled everyone who heard it. I don't know what made him plead guilty. I do not imagine it is remorse, because behind those eyes today, I did not see that. What she saw was the same thing Sergeant Fraze had described: a man who felt nothing, a man who'd written in his letter that he had an abyss for a soul, a man who called himself a born psychopath. David Sparks knew what he was. He'd written it down. He described it in detail. Then one night, a 5-foot-tall mother of 4 stumbled into his house, drunk and vulnerable. He did exactly what his letter said he was capable of. The Savannah Spurlock case became a training study for law enforcement. Sergeant Fraze discussed it on the Kentucky Department of Criminal Justice Training's podcast, using it as an example of how to handle complex missing persons investigations. The full investigative file was released to the public in 2022, after the case was officially closed. Everything pointed to one conclusion: this was preventable. If those 2 men hadn't left, if Savannah's friend hadn't argued with her at the bar, if she'd stayed home that night instead of going out. But life doesn't work that way. Savannah Spurlock went out for one night, her first night in months. She deserved to have fun. She deserved to feel young. She deserved to dance and drink and laugh without worrying about 4 kids at home. She deserved to be safe. Instead, she got into a car with strangers, and one of those strangers had already decided what kind of person he was. Lisa Toma issued a warning in the aftermath of Savannah's death, directed at young people everywhere. Hold your trust as a treasure. Evil was lurking for Savannah, and you never know what wolves are lurking. You can't always spot the wolves. David Sparks didn't have a history of violent crimes. His criminal record was described as low to moderate. He worked construction. He rented a house. He appeared normal. The only indication of what he really was existed in a handwritten letter hidden in his nightstand. A letter that read like a confession waiting to happen. When Savannah Spurlock walked through his door in the early morning hours of the 4th of January 2019, David Sparks proved those words were true. He didn't care. He felt no love. He squeezed the last breath out of another human. Then he smiled about it. Savannah's 4 sons will grow up without their mother. They'll celebrate birthdays without her, graduations, weddings, the birth of their own children. All because their mom wanted one night off one night that ended in a strawberry patch 19 inches deep.